I used to remember when I was an analyst, I would look at a multitude of projects. And the projects that didn't work was very simple. You'd almost know it from the onset because they would actually cost more to build the infrastructure to reach the site than the actual mine itself.
Wow.
And that just doesn't make any sense.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Betweenplays Stock Market Strategies. And once again, we have Killian Charles of Brunswick Exploration. Killian, how you doing today, buddy?
I'm doing pretty well. Yourself?
I'm doing pretty well. You know, I was interested in doing while we were talking about this a little bit. Um, Going into maybe your whole analyst brain, we take apart, we'll take the CEO, put it over here a little bit, and take this analyst part of you going back into your past. And curious about more like, I guess, speaking about lithium in general, understanding the commodity. I think this is something really interesting. I think a lot of people out there don't really get it. So what I'd like to ask you is, when it comes to lithium itself, and we have, let's say, these numbers that we're all looking at, like 1% and 2%, hard rock versus lithium brines or clay brines and stuff like that. What is it from your perspective, from an analyst, that you can tell like investors, and like, what is it that we should be looking for? What are the differences between them? How do you see this? Maybe explain a little bit about that.
Yeah, you know what? It's a really interesting topic because it's an industry that not a lot of people fully appreciate. We come in with these preconceived notions either from the precious metal side, and then as well from, let's say, the base metal side, although there's a lot of similarities on the base metal side. It's a little bit different from those industries. So, at a high level, you sort of mentioned it, there's three main sources that we look forward to. Hard rock, we're mining spodumene and to a lesser extent these other minerals you might hear, lepidolite, pedalite, Holmquist. The only one that truly matters is spodumene. Everything else is of lower interest from an industrial perspective. Even ourselves in Brunswick, you know, finding lepidolite is of no interest. We are looking for spodumene. The best mines in the world are spodumene mines. The largest mines in the world are spodumene mines. That's what we are focused on. And that's what most investors, when they're looking at the hard rock, need to focus on. That's something that's really, really important. Historically, that first source of lithium and one of the largest, longest lived asset were spodumene. My view has always been very simple. We've been mining spodumene for 100 years. We're going to continue mining it for 100 more years.
Yeah.
It is a good, reliable, well understood source of lithium. And that's not going to change anytime soon. So to me, when you're talking about hard rock, well, we can go into grade as well a
Yeah.
little bit later on. But when it comes
Yeah.
to hard rock, specifically spodumene, your bread and butter type of stuff. And if there's one thing that the mining industry wants to do is to keep it as simple as possible. The
Mhm.
amount of time that you start to, building a mine is so tough. And the amount of time you're going to trip up on something, if you're already starting with different ore that requires a different processing technique or anything of that nature, you're just starting from so much further back than something that's tried and true. Then the other sources that we've been mining for a long time are brines,
Yes.
predominantly in South America, a few in the US, a few in
Correct.
China. Those are ancient seabeds, if you will, where, the source of lithium is in a primary state. That means it's there as raw lithium, and we kind of dissolve this lithium salt, let these beds of water that contain lithium as well as other minerals sort of evaporate slowly. We're allowed to pull out some other salts, such as sodium, table salt, magnesium salt. And then we're left with this liqueur that we then process to form lithium carbonate, lithium hydroxide. As opposed to hard rock, where you're producing that intermediary step. I'm not directly producing lithium carbonate. I'm not directly producing lithium hydroxide. It's
Yeah.
similar to base metal, where I'm producing a concentrate that is then purified into those elements that we then use into batteries and other components.
Okay.
Then we're
And
left with the unproven ones. All
okay.
right. So those would be your clay sources.
Oh,
Tacker Pass is going to try. It's unproven technology at a commercial scale. We're all going to hope that they succeed, but there's a significant metallurgical and execution risk. And I invite everyone to be very careful on that front. Similarly, you have ultra low grade brines. So these would be things that you might hear as the oil field brines. There's some in Canada. You're talking about concentrations that are only a few parts per million. To give you an order of magnitude, when you're looking at some of these brines that are 70 ppm, 100 ppm, when you're talking about percentage, you're like talking about 10,000 ppm. I mean, it's 1,000 times higher grade than
absolutely.
some of these brines. It's quite a significant difference on that front. So those are, a little bit of black box magic as well. You're dealing with ultra low grades. It's unproven on a commercial scale, although you do have higher grade brines. Some of them in the US, you're talking about things like Standard Lithium. Those are interesting to me. Those have potential because you're dealing with grades that are still low, but more like in the 800 ppm, 1000 ppm. That has a chance of truly working there. But
Okay.
at the end of the day, your bread and butter when it comes to lithium extraction always is going to be spodumene mining. Everything else is auxiliary to this main source of lithium. And if you look at most of the big boys out there,
Yes.
they're all looking for hard rock sources more than they are looking at other sources of lithium. If I look at don't get me wrong, they've been buying brines, lots of brines in South America, these salars,
Yeah.
but they prefer to look at hard rock. If I look at the acquisitions that
Oh yeah.
have and haven't happened in Australia over the last couple of years, what have they been? They've been
Hard rock.
spodumene
Yeah.
deposit after
Absolutely.
spodumene deposit after spodumene
Yeah.
deposit.
Historically and presently, that's exactly what it is.
Absolutely.
Even Elon
And
Musk is super interested in the hard rock, in the spodumene.
they're
That's
build
what he loves the
absolutely.
most.
Yeah, they're building a big refinery down in Texas. So they're actually going to be very hungry for hard rock sources. It's something that carries a lower risk profile. Again, mining is a risky business. There's a lot of places you can trip up. And so to add all these execution risk already on such a big plate, on such a big balancing act, it gets really tough really quickly. And then when you're looking at hard rock, you also have to be careful because not all the sources are the same. You
That's
know,
interesting.
we've always viewed hard rock more as an industrial mineral, not even just a base metal, but as an industrial mineral, like iron ore, all right, like phosphate, like all these other industrial commodities. And when you start to look at it from that angle, you really have to reinvent the type of assets that work. You want things that have the simplest metallurgical pathways, all right, that require the least amount of processing, that have the least amount of impurities, and the best amount of infrastructure. Because if you can't move that, I always joke, diamond mines, they just need a plane that goes to Antwerp. Gold mines, they need a bricks armored truck. But once you're in the base metal side, and definitely when you're industrial side, if you don't have access to rail or some type of heavy infrastructure, you're out to lunch. It's just never gonna work.
So basically, if the infrastructure, like that is one of the things that we notice about Brunswick as well, is that your infrastructure, you're always trying to keep it, within like a 40 kilometer, very close to home. Like, what I mean, you're not trying to go so deep out into the middle of nowhere. Would you be able to explain why, like, what are the dangers maybe or the pitfalls that arise if, someone is out in the middle of no man's land versus, the whole Brunswick concept? Is there any dangers with it? Like, what is so important about this?
Look, it's not so much a danger, but it's always questions that investors need to ask themselves. I used to remember when I was an analyst, I would look at a multitude of projects. And the projects that didn't work was very simple. You'd almost know it from the onset because they would actually cost more to build the infrastructure to reach the site than the actual mine itself.
Wow.
And that just doesn't make any sense in my books.
Wow.
About 15 years ago in Quebec, and it's kind of funny because you can sort of see the mirror image to it with lithium right now. But 15 years ago, there was an iron ore boom in the province. The iron
Okay.
ore price was hopping. There was a lot of interest. And it so happens that just like the way Quebec is blessed with lithium, well, it's also blessed with a lot of iron ore. There's a lot of iron ore deposits across the province,
Okay.
except many of those projects are frankly impossible to reach.
Wow.
But back then, there was a lot of interest, and a lot of those companies that had those projects ran really, really well. But they were so remote, hundreds of kilometers from infrastructure or tidewater or any exit solution, that they essentially went nowhere. All of these projects, one by one, slowly died off, and now I'm sure you could buy them for a bag of chips. And there's no interest to develop them because it would cost more for infrastructure. And lithium is a little bit the same way. When I look at a map of Quebec and I look at where a lot of the major lithium discoveries are happening, things like Corvette with Patriot, things like Winsome with Adina, those are fantastic assets. And they're all within this sort of area where if I was actually to drop a pin on Mirage, they're all within 100 kilometers. And that's sort of what you want to see. You want to see a district develop where everyone benefits from shared infrastructure, whether it's power,
Oh, makes
road,
sense.
rail. Those are things that are so important to actually develop this industry and not just make technical discoveries, but actually find mines. That's always been what we're trying to do in Brunswick since day one. It's great to find lithium, but for us, that's not enough. We want to find a mine. And so it permeates our entire process of what we're looking at. There's large parts of Canada that have significant potential, but, the team never looked there. We knew that there was never going to be any real potential from an infrastructure from perspective. There's geological potential, but there's no infrastructure potential. So as much as it pains me, I have to ignore those areas. And let me tell you, it was painful. There really are areas that every time I would look at them, I'd be like, there's going to be a world-class discovery. There's going to be an asset discovered here, and it's going to be fantastic,
Oh,
except it's 500 kilometers away from anything that looks remotely interesting. And so what am I going to do with that? Like
well,
as much as I want to, it's going to cost hundreds of millions of dollars just to explore up there. And, the project is going to be untold billions. We're not there as an industry.
it's so true. I just want to add on that. It's so true what you're saying, that because a lot of these investors, because they're trying to become more educated on what to look for, and because we had a big boom in 2020, 2021 of people coming in and just putting their money anywhere and hoping to make money on that. But I could see that the people are starting to change. They're really trying to educate themselves, and it is true that if you are out in the middle of nowhere, I mean, you still got to get the cranes there. You still have all the stuff to do the drill. That's going to cost massive amount of money. Forget about finding something and then having to actually then set up the infrastructure. Even before that,
Oh,
everything
I know.
is costing exponential.
Absolutely. And it's something that is so woefully underappreciated. Again, you have remote mines. You absolutely have remote mines. But I think it's quite telling what those remote mines actually go and capture. They're gold mines,
Yeah.
they're diamond mines.
Yes.
They're never base metal assets. They're never industrial minerals. One of the best example that's especially for those new investors who may not know about this type of assets. And is that perfect example. I invite everyone to look up Izok Lake, Izok. All right. It's a famous example of an absolutely fantastic discovery. It's rich, it's relatively big, it's beautiful, just great, great intercepts. And every so often, it used to come around in the industry whenever you'd have a bull run in copper or a bull run in gold or in whatever commodity, and it'd be brought around and people would invest in it, thinking, oh, this is the time that Izok Lake it's going to work. Except Izok Lake is something like a couple 100 kilometers from Tidewater. It's just so far removed that eventually they figured out, okay, well, so we're gonna have to build this massive road that the trucks are gonna take and drive down for 100 kilometers. Is there anything that we could possibly find along this road to make it work? Just anything. And so they looked 100 kilometers from this proposed road in either side, and they found one thing. They did find one
Okay.
thing, but it still wasn't enough. It was still just too remote to ever fundamentally work. And it's something that people need to pay attention to day one. Where is it located? How are you getting that material out? And if no one can answer that question, then it's tough. It's
Yeah.
tough. I'm really happy that investors are trying to get more knowledgeable on the industry, because then it avoids mistake and it makes sure that they are able to monetize and make real gains. Identify the stories that are undervalued. Could be Brunswick, could be something else, doesn't matter. As long as they're educated, they'll understand and find the ones that make the most amount of sense for their portfolio.
Well, naturally, I mean, Brunswick is my number one choice. And it's all because of how aggressive that, you have been. I mean, the company has been in trying to unlock resources everywhere. Um, and this brings me to another question. I mean, we know what lithium is used for. We know that it's for the EV industry. We know for batteries and battery storage. All this is the future. We all know
Yeah.
where it's going, and we have a compounded annual growth rate that's positive. So even in the industry, we're looking at all this kind of stuff. Going back a little bit of these discoveries that are trying to be untold, I'm just curious about, because we're learning about lithium here. What is it that you look for as indicators that might have lithium in this area? Could you just go a little bit into that? Because I'm sure people would be interested in that little aspect of it.
Yeah, look, it's something that's intertwined in our DNA, right? The
Okay.
first thing that we did, to go back to that infrastructure again, because look, I can't control for geology. Well,
Yeah.
I can't control for metallurgy. I can't control for size. I cannot control for grade. You know, those are all things that are, until I've landed on it, they're outside of my control. I don't know. I just know that this area might have potential. That's great. What I can control from the onset is that infrastructure. So again, we eliminated large
Like that.
portions of the country right off the bat. And then we started doing basic compilation, just bread and butter type of geology. Look, we spent a lot of time reading academic papers, understanding the preferred environment, where to look, where are areas of interest, and then putting those on a map and saying, okay, well, is there any else in this broad area? Where should we focus? Is there any historic geochem? Maybe there was a lithium anomaly. Maybe there was a mineral that, or an element that's associated to lithium, that sticks out in the whole rock. Those are all things that we, myself and the team, spent a lot of time poring over and identifying. To go back to, let's say, something that we staked in Greenland. Greenland's an area that has never seen lithium exploration, ever, ever, ever. And that's really interesting to me. No one's
Oh
ever
yeah.
bombed. But then if you look at it from a geological potential, well, the geology is good.
Oh yeah.
The areas of interest. Turns out there's pegmatites as well, but they were never ascertained. And then we can also see some of these indicator elements, rubidium. We can see some of those indicator minerals, such as tourmaline, such as beryl. Doesn't mean that there's anything there, but it gives us a good clue that, hey, this is an area we should work in. And that's always been the in the DNA of the company that we're living a generational opportunity for lithium, for discoveries of new lithium asset. But it's more than just that. Because frankly, if this industry was still dependent on China, it wouldn't work.
No.
Remember,
No.
hard rock deposits only produce the intermediary step, the spodumene concentrate.
Yes.
For the time being, that concentrate needs to go on a boat and do thousands of kilometers to be processed in China. Slowly and surely, we are trying to break that up
Oh, it would
by
have to.
building that refining capacity in North America and to a lesser extent in Europe. And that for us is primordial because at the end of the day, the assets we discover here are going to feed, we'll say, a local economy to a certain extent,
Yeah.
a much more proximal market. Because we're not going to bring in spodumene concentrate from the main producer, which is Australia, out to North America. That doesn't make any sense.
No.
Or out to Europe again. That doesn't make
No.
any sense. We're going to need what are these, what I would like to call local sources. And so it's really important to find these assets in Quebec, in Ontario, in Canada, in places like Greenland as well, that are considered local. And that's why we sort of made that push down here because we can see the larger picture, right? We're seeing that ecosystem build itself, which again is something we haven't seen in so long in the mining industry. We've been so used to seeing mining investment, downstream mining investment, all right, not the
Yes.
mines themselves, but everything that we do with the mines predominantly happen in China, new investments that we've almost become coddled as mining executive, mining companies, mining investors, that it all goes out to China. But this is the first time in pretty much all of our respective careers where we're
Yes.
seeing significant downstream investment outside of China.
Yeah.
That hasn't happened since the 50s, 60s, or 70s.
Oh yeah.
It
It's
is
definitely a
a
shift.
huge pivot. It is a huge trend, which is why when people talk about slowing EV cars and all that, they're missing the big picture. It's not
Yeah.
about today.
No.
These mines that we're looking for, that Patriot is trying to build, that Winsome is trying to build, that our peers are trying to advance, they're not mines for today. They're mines for in the next few years. And when I look
Absolutely.
at the industry over the next few years, that's where it matters. That's where I see a lot of potential.
Absolutely. I mean, the compounded annual growth rate of lithium alone, I mean, is in the positives. The compounded annual growth rate of electric vehicles is in the positives as well. You know, we can look at anyone that's trying to stop this. The shift is literally it's impossible. We have too many, even EV companies that are like startups that are trying to get on. And when you look at like China, for example, there was a vehicle that just came out like today, Xiaomi or something, some kind of name like that, and the sales they were all sold out. And then you look at BYD. BYD is making cars that are like affordable to people. They have Xpeng, of course, that has their own vehicles, or Neo Auto. Um, Goshen's coming out also with their own kind of batteries, which is going to be for range anxiety, killing range anxiety. So the future, definitely, when we're looking at just electric vehicles alone and battery management storage systems and stuff like that, I mean, it's always in a compound annual growth rate. And this basically just brings me to something else. When we're looking at lithium spot price, I mean, because we're looking at compound annual growth rate, we're looking at building for the future, definitely for the future. And that just automatically means that that transition, that tipping point, once that happens, there's no coming back at that point. So, and we're
Oh, look,
probably here right
but we've
now,
already
right?
reached that tipping point. I
There,
take the
I
view
agree.
we've already reached it.
I agree.
Let's look over the last few years. You know, the only reason spodumene price and hydroxide price and carbonate price, lithium hydroxide, lithium carbonate price hit those all-time highs. You know, for spodumene, you were well over $5,000 a ton US. For carbonate hydroxide, you were in the 70 to $80,000 range per ton. The only reason you hit those prices is because you've hit that tipping point. Now, the industry tried to respond.
Correct.
It did somewhat. It mostly came from the most of the response came from artisanal miners of all places, predominantly in China, in Madagascar, and in the Congo and in Zimbabwe. Those artisanal miners are largely they're very price sensitive, and when you had that price pulled back, they've largely left the market. And that's what people don't appreciate. You know, you kind of had a bubble on both sides. You had a
Yes.
bubble when the price rose to 5,000. That's not sustainable.
No, no,
Like as much as I would like to say line always goes up, it can't. It doesn't.
no.
Eventually there's a breaking point. But on the same side, because we had reached that tipping point, line does not always go down. And so you needed to form that bottom. And I know I've said it before, but you've seen it happen exactly how I expected it to happen,
Yeah.
where you had mine closures, you started having scale back production,
Correct.
and within 2 weeks from the price hitting $800 a ton, you know, and the analysts were so pessimistic in the space. They were slashing their estimate. Oh, it's only going to do $1,000 from here to the end of the year.
Yeah.
It's going to be miserable. Woe is me.
Yeah.
And then within 2 weeks from that, the price started recovering. And it recovered 40% from its lows.
Yeah. That's incredible.
40%. That's
Yeah, that's
crazy.
incredible. Yeah.
That's outrageous.
Yeah.
And already, you know, we're every time that there's a new announcement, it's either at the same or a better price. Whenever there's an auction for spodumene concentrate, it's at a better price than before. And so to me, that's so important because it tells you that we've, again, turned the corner past that tipping point in terms of being at the bottom. And now we're looking back up. And all of these analyst projections that were, you know, so pessimistic,
Yeah.
we've already beaten them. So
Oh
when I
yeah.
look to even just to the second half of this year, when I look to the future, there's nothing that's fundamentally changed. We've already reached that tipping point. You know, you mentioned all those car manufacturers. I think I think people when they look at EVs, they get so caught up on the Tesla side of things that they miss they look the trees and they miss the forest type of situation,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And what I mean
We're
by
yeah.
that is every Western car manufacturer tried to make a Tesla killer. Like they tried to find their Series S killer, their
Yeah.
Tesla Model 3 killer, Ford, GM, Volkswagen, Hyundai, Toyota. They all tried to go after getting that particular market. They wanted their showcase car.
Correct.
And what did the Chinese do? The Chinese couldn't care about making a Tesla. They
No.
don't want to,
But
but that's not their real market. They said
no.
to themselves, we got to make a Honda Civic killer, a Toyota
Yeah.
Corolla killer.
Absolutely.
That's but electric. That's
Yep.
what we want to do. There's only so many buyers of $100,000
Oh,
cars.
absolutely.
You know, there's only so many of these cars that you can sell. And, you know, all these car manufacturers in the West were obsessed with making all these $100,000 cars.
Yeah.
I remember when I was a kid, $100,000 car, I'd be like, wow, you're getting a Porsche, you're getting a Ferrari. What kind of
Yeah.
ultra fancy car are you getting?
Exactly.
No, I'm getting myself now. It's like I'm getting myself a sedan. It's a bit boring.
It's like
But
okay, sure.
yeah, it's like, oh, wow, it's a lot of money for a sedan.
Absolutely.
But what are the
No.
Chinese doing? The Chinese aren't even thinking about that. They're
No.
trying to make a car that's full electric car that's 20, 25, 30,000 US.
That's right.
That's the future. because I know for a fact there's a lot of people that would like to buy a car that's 20, 25, $30,000 with decent range.
Oh yeah.
That's the future we're all looking to. That's that next wave of demand.
Well,
So
I'm one of
people
them.
need to separate. It's not about slowing EV cars. It's the type of EV cars and it's the type of manufacturer that's slowing down.
Absolutely, absolutely, and like I've said this before. It's been 2 years I've been waiting for an electric vehicle. A FEV or an electric vehicle, and I've been on a waiting list. One of them was, oh, man, we were in the hundreds. Okay, so the sales are there. We're at like 75 now, and it's 2 years because we're not going for a Tesla. If we wanted a Tesla, we'll go and you could pretty much pick one up. It'll be ready in not too long. But we're looking more for like the Hyundais and in these, and to each their own. I just like the way the inside, the finishings are done. I don't, but the point is that all of these guys, they're going in these ranges, these price ranges that are much more affordable. And I find in some cases, that's just my own personal thing. You get more bang for your buck, whatever.
Yeah.
And that's just the way it is. But absolutely, I mean, if I was out in China, I would definitely be out driving one of these BYDs and stuff. And the fact that they're trying to create, manufacturing plants in Mexico, and Mexico wants them to be there, you could see that. And Donald Trump, he said, well, if they think they're going to go to Mexico and they're going to flood our market with EVs, well, we're going to put a tariff of 100%. And why did he say that? Because people do want them.
Yes,
That's the only reason why he
exactly.
would have said that, you know?
And that tells you how different the discussion should be, and people
Yes.
are not somewhat on the wrong thing, but they
No,
need to take a medium and long-term view and realize what's being pitched to them and told to them
absolutely.
and what the implication of the headline. It's really easy to say EV sale cars slowed still up but slowed down.
It also
You have to
depends
ask
where I guess
yourself,
you're
well,
reading it from, right?
why? Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But then why?
Yeah.
How?
What
What are the
type?
implications? Exactly. What type? Those
Yeah.
are all super important questions to the point now. If you look at some of the commentary that, let's say, the Volkswagen, the GMs, the Fords of this world are saying,
Yeah.
we're not talking about making a Tesla killer anymore.
No,
Now they're saying
no,
about making a BYD killer.
no.
That tells you the game has changed and the
Yeah.
next wave of major investment is happening and the next wave of major demand is only starting. There's still so much upside left here. And so that's where now's the time for investors to ask the tough questions, ask the tough metallurgical question, ask the tough mineralogical questions, ask the
Absolutely.
tough infrastructure questions,
That's right.
grade, resource size, all of these things to figure out, okay, is this going to be a mine? Is this an asset that has a chance of being a mine? Because ultimately, that's the job of any junior mining company,
Yeah.
not to make a discovery. Making a discovery is great and it's fantastic, and hats off to anyone that does so, but it's
Correct.
more than that. Junior mining is about finding mines. That's what we should be doing, and that's what we're focused on doing inside Brunswick. It's that simple.
I love where this is going, because I completely agree with all that. That's why I love Brunswick so much. The money's going into the ground, and you're just so aggressive in looking for building a mine, or like say if we can get two, it's even better. And I love the fact that you're out in Greenland. I mean, for me, this is completely positive. Um, Politicians have been talking about Greenland. I've been hearing a lot of analysts that are in the mining sector rave that this is such a great place, and to keep with this whole Star Trek thing that was started, it's like the next frontier, so to speak. Greenland is the next frontier, and I'm super excited that you ended up picking up an asset in Greenland. I am just really stoked to find out what happens with that. Of course, with Mirage and with Elnron and Anakatao, and then the other one I won't be able to say. It picks. You probably can do that one better than me, but this is amazing stuff. And yeah, as an investor, I'm proud that to be a part of Brunswick. And naturally, I'm happy that you're on the show and you're educating people about the mining industry and about lithium in general.
Yeah, look, and that's always been my view. And if people, I always tell them, if people have questions, people want to know more, always happy to have that chat. You know, even if somebody asks you a question or if people want to reach us at info@brw.ca, we're happy to answer people's question and help them understand the intricacies of this market. It's one that's a little bit different, but if you come in without too many preconceived notions, but you know, asking the right questions, then you can really help yourself on that front. And that's what it's
Absolutely.
been, you know, always we're trying to do. We're trying to ask ourselves the right questions every single day of the week when it comes to our asset. And it's the exact same questions investors in the lithium industry should be asking themselves.
Oh, that's
And
great.
if they fall on Brunswick, that's fine. If they'd rather own Patriot, that's fine. If they'd rather own Winsome, that's fine. As long as they feel comfortable and have answered those questions, then, you know, I'm going to be happy because we all win if this industry wins.
Absolutely.
You know, it's not, again, I keep saying it's not about Brunswick versus Patriot versus Winsome versus any other company in the space.
Nope.
If we're talking about building an industry, and if we're talking about developing a sector, they all need to collectively win. We
Amazing.
all need to build our mine. We all
Absolutely
need to
amazing.
discover mines.
Absolutely amazing. Everybody out there, we'll wrap this up, Killian. It was great having you on the show. Honestly, thank you so much for being here, everybody. Killian Charles, CEO of Brunswick Exploration. Now, if you're going on looking for the ticker symbol, of course, it's BRW.V on the Venture Exchange, and over the counter, it's BRWXF. Look out for that. And thank you so much for coming on and explaining, the differences between hard rock and all kinds of stuff with the lithium sector, because you didn't have to do that. And that's very commendable on your part. Thank you for coming to do that.
Hey, look, always a pleasure to be here.
Between Plays, it's the journey and what you do between where you are and where you want to be. Research, prepare, plan, and execute your strategy. Do your DD and stay strong in visualizing and achieving your goals. Our strategy is unique since 2020. An original concept imitated, never duplicated. Real conversations with media influencers, educational and expert speakers, analysts and consultants. Between Plays, bridging the gap between companies and investors.